dangerous mistakes Catholics make at Mass without knowing. Why many leave unchanged. Picture a man named Thomas, 53 years old. Catholic since the day he was carried into a church as a newborn wrapped in white cloth. He has never missed a Sunday without a serious reason. He knows the creed by heart. He knows when to stand, when to kneel, when to sit. He has received communion thousands of times. He drops something in the basket every week without fail. And last Sunday, driving home from Mass on the gray, quiet morning, he said something out loud to nobody in his empty car. He said, "I don't feel anything anymore." Thomas is not losing his faith. Thomas is not a bad person. Thomas is not being punished by a distant God who has gone quiet. Thomas is making 5 mistakes he does not even know exist. Silent mistakes. Invisible mistakes. The kind nobody warns you about because most people sitting around you every Sunday are making the exact same ones. And the most devastating part of all is this. While Thomas sat in that car feeling empty, the Mass he just attended was overflowing with everything he had been asking God for. The grace was there. It was always there. He simply never received it. Today you are going to find out exactly why. And what you are about to hear may be the most important thing you encounter all year. Before we name a single mistake, you need to stop and truly see what the Mass actually is. Not what it feels like on a tired Sunday morning when the alarm goes off too early and the children are arguing and the parking lot is already full. What it actually is beneath all of that. At that altar, heaven does not symbolically open. It tears open. The sacrifice made on Calvary, on that ugly hill outside Jerusalem on a Friday afternoon when the sky went black at noon and the earth shook and a soldier looked up and whispered words he did not fully understand. That sacrifice becomes present again. Not a memory, not a replay, not a beautiful ritual pointing back to something that happened long ago. Present, real, the same offering, the same love, the same God pouring himself out completely without hesitation. Grace flows through that, opening the way light floods a room the moment a sealed door finally swings wide. Not a trickle, not a carefully measured portion. A flood, held back by nothing, aimed directly at you. Every Sunday, every altar, every parish in every city and forgotten village on earth. God withholds nothing. He has never withheld anything. Which means every single person who walks out of Mass unchanged walked away from something that was already completely and unconditionally theirs. Mistake number 1. You arrive at Mass the way you arrive at an appointment you cannot cancel. God arrives at Mass the way a father arrives at the moment his child finally walks back through the front door after a very long time away. He is there before the first candle is lit, before the opening hymn rises into the air, before the priest even steps onto the sanctuary. Fully present, completely attentive, already facing the door. But you rush in breathless at the last second, coat half buttoned, mind still knotted in traffic and unfinished thoughts, and you slide into the pew and consider yourself present. Your body arrived, but you never did. Here is an image that will stay with you long after today. A surgeon can carry the most refined skill in the world into an operating room. The instruments can be perfect, the preparation complete. But if the patient cannot be still, the work simply cannot be done. The capability was always there. The only thing missing was stillness. When you arrive early and sit in silence before Mass begins, you are not simply being punctual. You are becoming still enough for grace to finally do what it has been waiting to do. You are tilting your whole soul towards something that was already there. And heaven, which never stopped pouring out, finally has somewhere to land. Mistake number 2. God speaks at every Mass the way a doctor delivers a specific result to a specific patient. Not to the room in general, not to the congregation as a crowd, to you, about the exact weight sitting behind your eyes right now that you cannot fully explain to anyone around you. The confusion that follows you from room to room. The decision pressing on your chest like a hand that will not lift. The relationship fraying quietly at the edges while life continues on the surface as though everything is completely fine. God arranged a reading for this particular Sunday before you were born. He knew you would be in that pew carrying exactly the specific pain. He placed the answer inside a sentence you were about to hear. But distraction moves like fog. Slow, silent, and total. Your ears catch the syllables. Your mouth forms the responses. And your mind slips 3 days sideways without you even noticing it happening. The sentence passes. The answer drifts by like a boat leaving the dock without you on it. And you sit there afterward wondering why God feels so silent, not realizing he just finished speaking. The word of God has never been weak. It has never been absent. But even the most powerful light ever to exist cannot enter a room whose shutters are nailed completely shut from the inside. Mistake number 3. Now slow down, because this chapter is quieter than the others, and that is completely intentional. When the offertory basket arrives, most people give something small and feel they have fully participated. A note, some coins, a familiar gesture repeated from years of habit, and God receives it. But in that same moment, while the hymn plays softly and the priest prepares the altar, God is asking for something the basket cannot hold. Not your attendance record, not your years of faithful service, not the amount written on the envelope. He is asking for the one thing you have never laid down. You already know exactly what it is. It has a name. It has a face. It has a weight you have carried so long it no longer feels like a burden because it has slowly become part of how you move through life. The bitterness, the broken dream, the fear you have spoken to no one, the plan you are still gripping tightly even as it quietly cuts your hand. Lay it down. Place it on that altar the way an exhausted traveler finally sets down something unbearably heavy after a journey that went on far too long. Because the altar was never a collection point. It was always an exchange. And God cannot fill a hand that is still completely closed around something else. Mistake number 4. If you hear only one thing today, let it be this. You are receiving the most extraordinary gift ever extended to a human being, and somewhere along the way you allowed it to become ordinary. The line forms. You stand. You move forward like every other Sunday before it, and your mind is already somewhere else before your hands are even open. But stop right here. That is not bread. It was never bread. That is the body of Jesus Christ. The same body that sweat drops of blood onto the cold ground in the garden the night before it was taken away. The same body struck across the face in a torchlit courtyard while a crowd watched without flinching. The same body nailed through the wrist bones and lifted against a sky that went completely dark at noon because even creation itself could not watch without breaking. That body coming into yours, his blood, his soul, the complete and total weight of his divinity choosing to enter the fragile, tired, struggling, ordinary human being that you are. The early Christians trembled approaching this moment, not from fear but from awe, from the sudden overwhelming awareness that they were standing at the very edge of the infinite, and the infinite was leaning toward them with open arms. Walk forward that way, every single time without exception. Because the moment receiving God becomes casual is a precise moment you stop receiving what God actually came to give. Mistake number 5. You leave before he finishes speaking. Some people begin quietly gathering their things right after communion. Keys already out, bag already on the shoulder, sliding toward the aisle before the final blessing has even been spoken aloud, as if the Mass belongs to them to end whenever they personally decide. But the final blessing is not a closing announcement. It is not the priest signaling that the car park is now open. It is a mantle being lowered deliberately and specifically onto your shoulders for everything waiting beyond those doors. Your Monday morning, the medical results still sitting in a pending file somewhere. The child whose choices are breaking your heart in a way you cannot say out loud to a single person. The loneliness that follows you into rooms already full of people. That blessing carries your name inside it. It was prepared for the exact life you are about to walk back into. And you stepped out from under it just seconds too soon. Imagine standing in heavy, relentless rain for a very long time, cold and completely soaked through. And then the moment a solid roof finally appears directly above you, turning around and walking deliberately back out into the storm. The covering was real. It was already there, already yours. You simply left before it could touch you. Here is what Thomas did not know sitting alone in his car on that gray Sunday morning feeling nothing. The mass had not failed him. Not once. Not in 53 years of faithful attendance. Not a single Sunday. The altar he sat before every week was soaked in grace he could not see and had never been taught to receive. The same grace that called consuming fire down from heaven onto a water-soaked altar while an entire nation watched with their faces pressed to the ground. The same grace that fed a broken and exhausted prophet alone in a wilderness with bread he did not earn, carried by hands he never could have predicted. The same grace that filled a locked room in Jerusalem so completely that grown men stumbled like people undone by something far beyond anything they had words for. That grace was at Thomas's Mass last Sunday. It was at your Mass last Sunday. It has been present at every single Mass you have ever attended without one exception. It never ran low. It never pulled back. It never looked at you and decided you were not worth the full measure of what heaven had to give. The door was open. The flood was already flowing. Heaven was torn wide and waiting. The only thing that was ever missing was a soul on the other side with still hands, an open heart, and the quiet, unshakable awareness of exactly where they were standing and who was already there. The Mass has never lost its power. It never will. You are simply about to discover what happens when you finally bring all of yourself inside it. The Mass was never empty. You were simply not yet fully there.